The wind howled through the skyscrapers, carrying sharp sheets of cold rain that lashed against the pavement of Ninth Avenue. Heavy drops fell relentlessly, beating on car windows, awnings, and blending into the metallic soundscape of a city that never paused. New York at night, opulent, infinite, and unkind. Luxury cars glided across the rain-slicked streets, their tires sending up sprays of water like miniature waves. In the heart of this city, no one paid attention to what existed on the margins, in places where the light from towering buildings never reached. Alexander King leaned back into the Italian leather seat in the rear of his Rolls-Royce. His black suit was perfectly pressed, his tie loosened, and his gaze was tired as it drifted out through the fogged-up window. The evening's event had been a resounding success. He had officially finalized the acquisition of Europe's leading cybersecurity network, a deal worth over $3 billion. A handshake, a few glasses of champagne, and the polished buzz of congratulations. But inside, he felt nothing but emptiness. "Heading straight home, sir?" the driver asked, glancing back slightly. Alex gave a faint nod, saying nothing. The car moved through glowing streets. When it stopped at a red light near Bryant Park, a red light that lingered unusually long, Alex's eyes wandered toward the sidewalk across the intersection. And that's when he saw them. A woman, young, thin, with wet hair plastered to her forehead, was sitting curled up between two shuttered storefronts, her back against a damp brick wall. In her arms was a baby, wrapped in an old faded coat, covered with a thin sheet of plastic like a brittle leaf. The child was sound asleep, cheeks flushed red from the cold. Her arms cradled the baby like a fragile cocoon, braving the storm. In front of her lay a piece of soggy cardboard with a scrawled message. "Please help. Anything helps." Alex sat up straighter. His chest tightened. It wasn't pity, it was her eyes. She wasn't looking at the car. She was staring out at the street. But in that one moment their eyes met. It wasn't a pleading look, not angry, not accusing. It held only one thing, the quiet fear of someone who had stopped believing in the kindness of others. Alex couldn't look away. He didn't know why he hadn't turned his head like he usually did. He, the man who had trained himself to block out everything that didn't serve his objectives. The man who once famously said, "Empathy is a liability in business." But he kept looking, and she stayed there. The rain kept falling. "I could—" He started to speak, but stopped, because even he didn't know what he meant to do. The driver looked back, puzzled. "Sir?" "Pull over, just for a moment." "Here?" the driver asked, confused. This wasn't a stopping zone, especially not for a billionaire. Alex didn't answer. He opened the door despite the pouring rain. He retrieved the umbrella from the side compartment and opened it overhead, neat, clean, completely out of place, amid the wrecked scene just 5 meters away. He walked toward the woman. She looked up at the sound of footsteps. For a brief second, fear flashed in her eyes, not because she recognized him, but simply out of reflex, the reflex of someone who had been hurt before when people got too close. "I haven't done anything wrong," her voice trembled. "I'm just sheltering here until she's better. She's had a fever. I'll leave as soon as the rain eases. Please don't call the police." Alex stood silent. The rain tapped steadily on the umbrella, sounding like a heartbeat inside his chest. He looked down at the child, a tiny, fragile being, asleep in the cold, her breath barely visible like a strand of silk. "What's her name?" he asked, voice low but steady. The woman flinched slightly, then answered after a pause. "Hope. Her name is Hope." Alex closed his eyes for a moment. He had heard that name before, Hope, from his late mother, when she held him on a station bench during a stormy night just like this. "As long as you're here, I still have hope." The rain found a way through the cracks in his heart, quiet and sudden. He didn't know what he would do next, but one thing was certain. Tonight, this woman would not have to cradle her child to sleep on the street. You're watching Soul Stories, where every story whispers of love, healing, and hope. Let us know which city you're watching from. Don't forget to subscribe and be a part of our journey. Now, stay with us. The story is just beginning. "Pop the trunk," Alex said curtly. The driver hesitated. "Sir?" "There's a leftover meal box from the event, and get the spare umbrella. A few seconds later, Alex returned with a still warm meal packed in premium aluminum and a folded black umbrella encased in sleek leather. He stopped just a step away from the young woman, not too close, not looking down with pity. "You need to eat something," he said, his voice low and steady. The woman looked at him, wary at first, but eventually reached out. Her fingers were so cold that it felt like ice brushing against his. "Thank you," she murmured, her pale lips offering a faint smile. "But I'll return the container. I don't want to owe you anything." Alex frowned slightly. He'd heard countless people say thank you, but never with such honest caution. "You don't have to return it," he replied. "You don't owe me anything." He opened the umbrella, shielding them both from the pouring rain. At that moment, the baby in her arms stirred and let out a soft, whimpering sound, the kind that came from deep, bone-chilling cold. The woman instinctively pulled the child closer, her chest tightening as if protecting her from the world. "She's had a fever since this morning. I just needed a place out of the wind until sunrise." Alex lowered himself slightly so his eyes met hers. Under the street lamp's glow reflecting off the rain-slick sidewalk, her face became clearer still young, cheeks sunken from hunger, hair tangled, eyes so deep it felt like someone had drowned an ocean inside them. He took out his wallet and pulled out a stack of cash, not to flaunt, just out of habit. But the moment he extended it, she shook her head. "I'm sorry, I don't take cash." Her voice was still soft, still trembling, but held a strange firmness. "Why?" he asked. Not judging, not mocking, just curious. She looked up, as if searching for a way to explain something bigger than words. "Because I've been taken advantage of before, and it always started with a few bills." Alex stood still. The wind picked up again, carrying a chill heavy with unspoken hurt. She continued, "If you really want to help, I just need one night, somewhere with a roof. I'll leave in the morning. I just don't want her to get pneumonia." He looked at her. Neither of them spoke. The only sounds were the steady patter of rain on the umbrella and the soft wail of wind through the city streets. 5 seconds. That was all Alex ever needed to decide a $300 million deal. But this time, it was about letting a homeless woman and her child step into his world. He didn't know if it was foolish or right, but he knew one thing for sure. If he walked away now, he wouldn't sleep tonight. "Come with me," he said. She froze. "What did you say?" He stood up, meeting her eyes. "I have a place. More than enough rooms. Just one night, like you said. No strings attached." She shook her head, tears welling up, her voice barely a whisper. "I can't believe this." "You don't have to believe it," Alex said, turning. "Just follow." He walked back toward the car without looking back, but seconds later he heard light footsteps behind him and the soft click of the car door opening. She climbed in, child in her arms, soaked through but silent. The driver glanced in the rearview mirror, bewildered. Alex said only one thing: "Home." The Rolls-Royce began to move. Outside, the rain still fell. But inside, for the first time in years, there was the breath of real life. The glass elevator glided upward, leaving behind golden streaks of light like reverse falling stars. At the very top of the King Dominion Tower, one of the tallest and most expensive buildings in Midtown, the steel doors slid open, revealing an entirely different world. The space inside was silent, unnervingly so. The penthouse, nearly 8,000 square feet, featured floor-to-ceiling windows facing Central Park. Its minimalist decor bordered on emptiness. White, black, gray, no paintings, no photographs, no sign that anyone had ever really lived here. Every item was high-end and precise, but nothing felt warm. Alex flipped on the lights. Cold white light spilled across the wooden floors, casting a pale glow on the trembling figure of the woman still cradling her child. "You can stay in the room at the end of the hall," he said, gesturing. "I had it cleaned earlier. There's a private bathroom, clean towels, and sleepwear. Not much, but enough." She hesitated. The baby in her arms let out a soft whimper, coughing weakly. Alex paused, then added, "There's infant fever medicine in the bathroom cabinet, and some milk. I wasn't sure which kind would work, so I had my housekeeper buy a few different types." She nodded, eyes red. There was no rain left on her body, but both she and the child still seemed wet-soaked in something deeper than rain. exposure, wounds, and a nameless fear. He pulled out a large towel and gently placed it in her hand. You can shower first, I'll leave food on the table. No rush. Thank you, she whispered. Her voice was hoarse, tired. Alex gave a quiet nod and turned away, giving them space. Only when their silhouettes disappeared behind the white wooden door did he exhale slowly. He stood alone in the open kitchen, surrounded by wine racks and luxury appliances worth hundreds of thousands, most of which he never used. As the seconds ticked by, the strange feeling in his chest lingered. It wasn't worry, it wasn't pity. It felt more like he had opened a room inside himself, one he thought had been locked long ago. Nearly an hour later, Lena stepped out. Her hair was dry and she now wore a simple cotton pajama set. She wore no makeup, no perfume, but the clean, unadorned simplicity made her face look unfamiliar. No longer the woman who had clutched her child in the rain. She looked like a mother, someone fighting not to fall apart. The baby Hope was wrapped in a light cream-colored blanket, sleeping in her arms. She's calmed down, Lena said softly, standing a few steps from the dining table, not daring to come closer. Alex set his book down. He hadn't been reading. His hand just rested there out of habit. I hope she's okay, he replied quietly. She is. All she needed was warmth and silence. They fell into silence themselves. Lena looked around as if only now realizing the sheer size of the apartment. It was so big she could hear the hum of the heating system. There were no toys, no half-finished drinks, no scuffs on the floor. The place felt like a museum, perfect, but cold. She said without looking at him, "This place doesn't feel like someone lives here." Alex looked up. "You're the first person who's ever said that." "Maybe because I'm the first one here not wearing a suit." She gave a faint smile, light as smoke. He almost chuckled, but instead raised an eyebrow. "Possibly." After a while, Lena stepped closer and gently laid the baby down on the sofa, surrounding her with pillows. She brushed Hope's hair lightly, then took a seat at the table, across from Alex. "I'm Lena," she said. "Lena Grace. And that's Hope, 8 months old." She looked up. "She doesn't have a full last name because—" She stopped. She didn't need to explain. Alex nodded, asking nothing. She looked at him, really looked as if seeing him clearly for the first time. "And you are—" "Alex," he said. "No last name, no business card." Lena held his gaze for a moment, then nodded. No reaction, no surprise. Number. Alex who? Alex King? The billionaire? Just a quiet, simple acknowledgement, as if he were simply a person, no title, no power. And somehow that made something in Alex feel a little lighter. Lena looked down at her hands, silent for a moment. Then she spoke, and her words made Alex's heart sink slightly. "Thank you for not asking why I was out there." He didn't know what to say, because in that moment he understood what she needed wasn't a question. She needed a space free from judgment, a roof quiet enough to heal beneath, and maybe just once in her life, a place where she didn't have to apologize for simply existing. The soft gasps and faint whimper of hope woke Lena in the middle of the night. The room was dim, lit only by the glow of a small bedside lamp, casting pale light onto white walls. Lena placed her hand on her daughter's forehead. Warm, not a high fever, but enough to make her heart tighten. Hope shifted restlessly, her breath short and fast, like a startled bird in the cold. Lena gently scooped her up, wrapped her in the soft blanket, and opened the door. The hallway stretched long and silent, dark wood floors beneath her feet. Every step echoed faintly, like the sound of memories. She meant to find the medicine cabinet in the guest bathroom, just as he'd told her, but the soft light spilling from the open kitchen made her stop. Alex was there. He wore a black t-shirt and lounge pants, a glass of water in his hand, his hair slightly tousled. The moment he saw her holding Hope, his expression shifted, alert, instinctual, like an unwilling father suddenly thrown into the role. "She's running a fever?" he asked, stepping closer. Lena nodded, resting Hope against her shoulder. "Probably from the sudden change in temperature. I know a few ways to reduce it naturally, but I didn't want to give her random medicine." Alex gestured for her to sit at the bar stool. then silently opened a cabinet. He pulled out a bottle of organic baby fever syrup, measured the dosage with a dropper, and poured it into the plastic cap before handing it to her. Lena looked at him surprised. "You know how to do this?" "No," Alex replied. "I don't have kids, but I've read enough to know how not to make it worse." She gave a tired smile, taking it. "Thank you." Hope whimpered, then relaxed against her mother as the medicine kicked in. Lena stroked the girl's hair, eyes rimmed red. Alex poured hot water into another glass and handed it to her. No questions, no pressure. Lena took a sip, then looked down. Her voice came after a long pause, soft and slow. "I used to be an executive assistant. Nothing fancy, but enough to get by. I had a small apartment, a neat closet, a decent savings account." She gave a bitter smile. "Then I fell in love with a man, believed everything he promised. When I got pregnant, he told me to take a few months off to rest. I listened. That was my biggest mistake." Alex stayed silent. No interruption. "One day he disappeared. My bank account was empty. Rent overdue. I was evicted when I was 7 months pregnant. My mom passed years ago. No family. No close friends. I had no one." Alex reached for a tissue, quietly offering it to her. But Lena didn't take it. She wiped her eyes with her sleeve, gaze still fixed on her daughter. "I used to think I was strong," she whispered. "But the first night I slept at a bus stop, I cried like I was falling apart." The kitchen sank into silence. Night wind brushed against the glass windows, making a distant rustling sound. Then Alex spoke, voice low, almost a whisper. "I used to beg for change with my mother, at East Station." Lena turned to look. He wasn't looking at her, just staring at some invisible point on the table. "I was 6. Every morning, she woke me with cold hands. We split a stale roll of bread from the night before. She used to say, 'As long as you're breathing, I still have hope.'" He paused. A crease appeared between his brows. Not grief, not regret, just depth. "When I was 10, she got sick. No one took her to the hospital. No one knew our names. No ID. One morning she didn't wake up, and I learned how to live without anyone ever calling my name." Lena clutched Hope tighter, trying to steady the strange ache his story stirred in her. Alex exhaled. "After that, I was placed in a shelter. Then came a scholarship, then college. The rest, you've probably read about in the papers." Lena gave a faint, sad smile. "I've never read the papers about you." Alex raised an eyebrow, lips lifting slightly. "Good." A stronger gust hit the windowpane. Hope stirred, then fell back asleep. The two adults remained a man who had forgotten how to trust, and a woman who had been forgotten by the world. No more words, no plans, no promises. Just two people each carrying invisible scars sitting in a cold kitchen at midnight, quietly sharing a flicker of warmth that had somehow survived the wreckage of their past. Early morning. The first light of day filtered through the massive glass windows, casting pale golden streaks across the cold wooden floors of the 61st floor apartment. Lena sat on the edge of the bed, her hair loose and still damp. Hope lay beside her, breathing steadily, her tiny face deep in sleep. The fever had eased during the night, though her cheeks remained flushed, like a dewy flower kissed by morning. Carefully, Lena slipped out of bed and began folding the items she'd borrowed. The towel, the pajamas, even the small blanket Hope had grown fond of. She stacked them neatly as if tidiness could somehow soften the weight of the unspoken gratitude in her chest. When she stepped out of the room, Hope was wrapped in a warm towel, and in Lena's hand was a small piece of paper with shaky handwriting. "Thank you. You don't need to know who I am. But last night, you saved both of us." She placed it quietly on the kitchen counter, turned and reached for the door. "Where are you going?" Alex's voice came from behind, calm, low, not harsh, but firm enough to stop her in her tracks. Lena turned slowly, hesitant. "I don't want to be a burden. You've done more than enough. I should go before that becomes too much." Alex crossed his arms, his gaze softening. "You don't have to go. I have extra rooms. And maybe I could use someone to help out around the place, small things. I'll pay you, and you and Hope will have somewhere safe to stay." Lena stared at him, stunned. You want to hire me as a housekeeper? Alex shook his head, his voice low and sincere. I don't need a housekeeper. I need human presence. And I think you and your daughter might need a place to start again. She looked at him longer this time, and though there was still a flicker of doubt in her eyes, the guarded edge had begun to fade. Just temporarily, she said. Only until you choose to leave, Alex replied. In the days that followed, life on the 61st floor began to shift, not loudly, not noticeably. Things changed like breath, slow, steady, and without anyone quite realizing when it became habit. Lena kept her promise she never pried, never asked questions. She cleaned, cooked, cared for Hope, and spoke very little unless spoken to. Alex respected her space just the same. They lived like two parallel lines, intersecting only when needed enough to keep the loneliness away, but not yet enough to call it closeness. Every morning at 7:30, Alex still left the apartment, coffee in hand, phone pressed to his ear. But Lena noticed something. Lately, he left a few minutes later than usual and returned a few hours earlier. One afternoon, while Lena was clearing the table, a soft giggle behind her made her turn around. Hope, usually clinging tightly to her mother, was sitting in Alex's lap for the first time, her tiny hands patting his shirt, mouth wide with laughter. Alex froze. His hand hovered gently behind her back, his eyes filled with disbelief. She's laughing at me? He asked, almost under his breath. Lena nodded lightly. She's a good judge of character. Hope clapped again. A clear, ringing laugh bubbled up like sunlight breaking through the glass. Alex smiled. Not the kind that accompanied contracts or shareholder meetings. A real smile. A human one. And in that quiet, private moment, something in his chest trembled. Not from duty, not from sympathy, but because, for the first time in a long time, he wanted to stay. To the world, Alexander King was everything one could dream of. A tech billionaire under 40, founder of one of the largest global data security systems, a face gracing the cover of Forbes. He lived among numbers, contracts, and cocktail parties where everyone knew his name but no one really knew him. The penthouse on the 61st floor lacked for nothing except the presence of someone who didn't need an invitation to walk through the door. Lena had adapted in her own quiet way, unobtrusive, meticulous, and invisible when needed. She made dinner, cared for Hope, and sometimes exchanged a few words with Alex at the end of the day, when both of them sat watching Hope crawl across the floor. But outside that apartment, Alex's world was far from quiet. You let her stay at your private residence? Emily, Alex's executive assistant, glared at him through the Monday morning video call. Alex didn't flinch. He kept signing documents on his tablet. Do you even know who she is? No background, no ID. She just showed up from some rainy night and now she's in your home? Alex answered without looking up. I know she's Hope's mother. A child who smiled the first time she saw me. That's enough. There was a pause before Emily's voice lowered. You realize if this leaks to the shareholders, it could be bad. I won't be able to shield you from everything. Alex looked up, his tone quiet but cutting. I don't need anyone to shield me, and I don't need permission to do what's right. That weekend, Alex hosted a private event for strategic investors, a luxurious gathering in a glass pavilion by the river, where everyone wore tuxedos and smiled politely with hollow eyes. Lena didn't want to attend. She'd worked in offices before, always from the sidelines wiping tables after events like this. But Alex insisted. You're not going to impress anyone. You're going so you don't have to keep hiding. She wore a simple black dress Emily had picked slightly loose, but elegant. She wore light makeup, hair pulled back neatly. Yet the moment she entered the lobby, eyes fell on her like silent blades. A woman with no name, no status, no clear past, and standing beside Alexander King. Lena stepped outside to the garden when Hope began to fuss. She didn't want to attract attention. But as she returned through the glass doors, she saw two security guards approaching, their faces polite but firm. Ma'am, we need to confirm your name and invitation to remain in the venue. You're not on the guest list. Lena froze, glancing at Hope asleep in the stroller near the wall of glass. She took a step back, unsure what to say. When a calm male voice cut through, She's my guest. Alex stepped forward. The golden light hit the edge of his black suit. His voice was steady low, but no one dared interrupt. I invited her. Her and her daughter are allowed here. He looked directly at the guards. If there's a problem, come to me. The guards hesitated, then bowed slightly and backed away. Lena looked at him, wide-eyed, still stunned. She whispered, "Why me?" Alex paused, then replied without hesitation, "Because you're not trying to stay, and I don't want you to go." That night, back in the apartment on the 61st floor, Hope had already fallen asleep, lips parted slightly, as if still dreaming. Lena tucked her in, then stepped out onto the balcony. The night air was cool, but not biting. Alex joined her a few minutes later, carrying 2 cups of tea. She accepted hers without a word. "You don't have to ask why," he said, his voice hoarse from the breeze. "But I still want to," she answered. "I'm no one, just a shadow that passed through your life." Alex looked out over the city below the lights glowing gold, red, and white like scattered fragments. Then he said, "Maybe because, out of the hundreds of people who've come near me, you're the only one who never asked how rich I am." Mornings in the 61st floor apartment no longer began with the sound of elevator doors or the relentless tapping of keyboards. Now they started with the sizzle of eggs in a pan, Hope babbling nonsense syllables, and soft laughter shared between people who never imagined they'd become a we. Alex sat at the breakfast table, his hair still tousled, the last button of his shirt undone. In front of him was a cup of black coffee, in a small bowl half of its contents now scattered around it, courtesy of Hope. Lena stood by the stove, humming a quiet children's tune as she toasted bread. It wasn't loud enough to break the morning calm, but just warm enough to fill the once cold kitchen with something that felt like life. Hope smacked her hands on the table and shouted, "Bob!" Alex chuckled. "Is that hello or a demand for food?" "Both," Lena said, glancing over her shoulder with a grin. "She's learning to tell sounds apart. Yesterday she called me nah. Close enough." Alex looked at the little girl and said slowly, "And me? Still a stranger, huh?" Hope responded by reaching out and grabbing his shirt, then beaming. From someone who once survived on 4 hours of sleep in a schedule timed to the minute, Alex had begun staying home more. There was no official reason. No one forced him. He simply started delaying a few meetings, rescheduling client calls. Working remotely became a regular choice, not because it was convenient, but because he wanted to hear Hope's laughter echo through the apartment each morning. He was still CEO, still ran a multi-million-dollar empire from his laptop. But now, in between the lines of code and investor reports, there were crooked crayon drawings stuck to the fridge. Little scribbles Lena called our 3-person family. Each evening, as the city lights blurred behind the thick glass, Alex would sit on the couch with Hope in his lap. Lena would curl up in the nearby armchair, wrapped in a thin blanket. "Once upon a time," Alex would begin. Not with fairy tales, but stories he made up about a robot searching for a real heart, a fish that lived in an old teapot, or a giant who was afraid of the dark. Hope didn't understand any of it, but she stared wide-eyed, listening with her whole face. Lena never interrupted, just smiled. A real smile. The kind Alex had never seen from an adult before. No boardroom had ever made him feel that way. No stock price had ever made him feel alive. One afternoon, Lena was teaching Hope to name colors using plastic spoons. She held up a red one and said, "Red. Zhongquatao." "Apple." Hope studied it, then pointed. "At Alex." "Red!" she shouted. Lena burst into laughter, nearly doubling over. "Red? No, sweetie, he's not an apple." Alex raised an eyebrow, pretending to be offended, but he laughed too. Then he looked at Lena. Her smile was unguarded, unworried, unhidden. It was wide and bright and natural, as if, for just that moment, she had forgotten life had ever hurt her. And that smile made something in Alex tighten not from pain, but from fear. Fear that if he wasn't careful, he might lose it. As Lena was clearing the dishes, Alex said softly, "You have a beautiful smile." She looked up, startled. "What?" "A smile that looks like it's never been broken by life," he said. She paused, then spoke, her voice low. Sometimes, it's not that people forget how to smile. It's that they're afraid once they start, they won't be able to stop. Alex stared at her for a long time. He didn't say anything else, but for the first time, he knew. He didn't want to protect that smile for her. He wanted to protect it for himself. Because no matter how many languages the world spoke, laughter would always be the one that made us most human. It was a clear morning. The sun was bright. Lena had just stepped onto the balcony with Hope in her arms when she saw Alex already sitting there, his morning paper folded open on the table. The coffee in front of him had gone half cold. But what made her stop was his eyes. They weren't angry. They weren't cold. They were still the kind of stillness just before wind stirs a lake. He slid the paper toward her. Page 3. Lena gently placed Hope into the stroller, her fingers trembling slightly. She looked down at the black and white print and felt her heart drop. Mystery woman spotted with Alexander, King linked to Techline embezzlement scandal. Beneath the headline was a grainy photo taken from afar, she and Hope stepping into Alex's car during last week's rainy morning. The caption read, Lena Grace, former executive assistant, dismissed under allegations of a $200,000 discrepancy, disappeared from the finance world 2 years ago. Her mind buzzed. She sat down next to Alex but didn't look at him. This isn't true, she whispered. At least, not the way they make it sound. Alex leaned back slowly, fingers laced together. Then tell me. Lena closed her eyes, inhaled, deep. You want to know who I was? She said, voice steady, but lined with old exhaustion. Fine. I was an executive assistant to the CFO at a company called Techline. He was also the man I loved. He was smart, powerful, and knew exactly how to make people feel special. She looked down at her hands. Her eyes didn't blink. When I got pregnant, he suggested I take some time off. I thought it was concern. But just weeks later, I stumbled across suspicious transfers, large sums of money moving through multiple shell accounts. I asked him. He said it was part of a rapid funding strategy. Her voice dropped. But when I started digging into the system, everything disappeared. She looked up. Her eyes were dry, but rimmed red. All that was left, login traces from my account at the exact times the transfers went out. They didn't need to investigate further. I was fired. No questions asked. No chance to defend myself. Alex didn't speak. Lena continued slowly, like untying knots buried deep in her chest. I thought they'd press charges, but they didn't. The company wanted it buried. Avoid scandal. So they did the easiest thing, made me the scapegoat. She gave a bitter smile. No court, no lawyer, just one termination email, and a deafening silence from people who used to call me colleague. She paused, then her voice dropped even lower. I already had hope inside me. No money, no home, no family. I didn't fight. I just wanted to keep her safe. So I disappeared. The balcony was silent. Alex didn't blink. I lost everything. My reputation, my savings. And when I found out I was pregnant, I had no one to call. She turned away. I wasn't trying to hide this from you. I just thought, if I told you from the beginning, what would you have thought of me? Alex didn't answer immediately. 1 minute passed, maybe 10 quiet breaths. Then he said, voice low, firm, I don't care who you were. I care who you are when hope smiles. Lena froze. That sentence, it wasn't forgiveness. It was recognition. As if he had just placed a hand on the wound she'd hidden and didn't pull away. Alex went on. You're not begging to be trusted. You just live like you don't deserve to be. But you know what? I've met people with flawless resumes and emptier eyes than the halls on the 3rd floor. Lena didn't know what to say. She just bowed her head, and for the first time the tears came. Silent but real. Hope began to fuss lightly in the stroller. Lena instinctively moved to stand, but Alex was already there. He picked the baby up, awkwardly but gently, and patted her back. Hope nestled her head against his shoulder and quieted. Lena watched them, and for the first time, she understood a feeling. Maybe she didn't have to run anymore. No need to prove anything. No need to hide. Maybe she could stay. The night fell gently. Outside, the first snow of the season began to drift in silence, soft flakes settling on the windows like the dust of an unfinished dream. Inside the 61st floor apartment, the hallway lights were off. Hope slept peacefully in her crib, stirring only slightly when a breeze tapped at the window pane. But in the farthest room, something else was unfolding. Lena was burning up. Her forehead radiated heat, her skin pale, damp with sweat pooling beneath the collar of her nightgown. She trembled in waves, drifting in and out of delirium. But even in that haze, she kept whispering her daughter's name, a primal instinct that rose above the fever. Alex noticed something was wrong around 1 a.m. when he glanced at the baby monitor and realized Lena hadn't moved in over 3 hours. Concerned, he walked in to find her curled up, drenched in sweat, her face contorted in pain. He touched her forehead, burning hot. He didn't call a doctor. She'd once confided in him that hospitals terrified her. So instead, he did things he never thought he'd do. He dampened warm towels. He brewed ginger tea. He Googled the simplest rice porridge recipe. He changed Hope's diaper, a task that stained his white shirt with formula. But for once, he didn't care. He placed Hope beside the bed in a small bassinet. Then he sat down and fed Lena spoonfuls of the cooled porridge. She managed 3 before fading back into unconsciousness. At 4 a.m., when the world outside was muted and still, Alex sat by her bed, gently pressing a warm cloth to her forehead. His hand never left hers for over an hour. And when sleep finally overtook him, he didn't move far, just leaned forward, resting his head on the edge of the bed, cheek pressed to the back of her hand, like a weary guard who had fallen asleep at his post. Lena woke near dawn, not because the fever had lifted, but because she felt something close, a steady breath warming her skin, a hand large, warm, impossibly human holding hers with a weight that was quiet but undeniable. She turned her head and her heart caught. Alex, his hair tousled, shirt wrinkled, was asleep beside her, slumped over the bed like a child fallen asleep waiting for a parent. His head rested gently on her hand, and the other still held the now cooled towel. The sight of it, intimate and unspoken, cracked something deep within her. Not tears of anger, not the grief of betrayal, but something else, something unfamiliar. For the first time in a very long while, she knew she wasn't alone. She cried, not loudly, not dramatically, just soft, silent tears that soaked the pillow, gentle and quiet, like the very first rain of the season. She cried because of the care that asked for nothing, because a man who could sign billion-dollar deals had knelt beside her at 2 a.m. to change her child's diaper, because the hand holding hers had tightened not out of habit, but some subconscious refusal to let go, even in sleep. Lena sat up slowly and reached for a nearby blanket, pulling it over his shoulders. Then, for the first time, she let her hand move through his hair, not because she had to, but because something inside her had stopped resisting the need to connect. Hope stirred and let out a tiny sound. Lena leaned over, gently lifting her into her arms. And there she stayed between a sleeping man and a waking child, and for a moment, the world felt anchored. Like everything that had once floated out of reach had found its way back. She didn't know when she had fallen in love with him. Maybe it was when he made tea, his hands still shaking. Maybe it was when he'd said, "I care who you are," when Hope smiles. Or maybe it was this exact moment, when there were no confessions, no labels, no declarations, but she knew. She loved him, a love that didn't need a name, didn't need a definition. Just this, being here, together, and the rest. She'd let time decide, still following the story. If this story found you outside of Soul Stories, we invite you home to where every touching tale begins with truth, hope, and heart. That morning wasn't extraordinary, just soft winter sunlight stretching across the wooden floors, the scent of toast drifting from the kitchen, and quiet music humming from the ceiling speakers. Hope sat in the middle of the living room, surrounded by colored blocks, stuffed animals, and plastic spoons Lena used to teach her colors. Alex had just wrapped up an online meeting. He took off his headset and leaned against the glass wall, holding a cup of coffee. his gaze quietly resting on the two girls who now lived at the center of his world. Hope crawled toward Lena, grabbing a green cube and holding it up proudly like a treasure. Lena smiled, reaching out to stroke her daughter's hair. Green block, green dot. Gah, Ian, Hope echoed, wobbly but proud. Alex chuckled under his breath. He didn't speak, just shook his head in quiet amazement at how quickly she was learning. Hope turned toward him. Her big brown eyes lit up, and then, "Da-da!" The room went still. Alex froze. The cup slipped slightly from his fingers, nearly dropping before he caught it. He looked at Hope. She clapped her hands and beamed. "Da-da! Da-da!" Lena spun around. She froze for a split second, then rushed forward, scooping Hope into her arms, whispering fast, "No, baby. No. He's not your daddy. Mama will teach you again. I'm sorry." She turned to Alex, panic in her eyes. I don't know why she said that. I never taught her that word. I apostrophe. She choked. Her eyes brimmed red, her hands shaking not from guilt, but from fear. Fear that she had broken something fragile. "I'm sorry," she repeated over and over. "I'll correct it, I promise." But Alex stepped forward. He didn't speak. He didn't stop her mid-sentence. He simply lowered himself and wrapped his arms around both Lena and Hope. Held them. Just tight enough. Just gentle enough. Lena froze. She didn't know what was happening, not until she heard his voice. Low, rough, and trembling. "It's okay. I've wanted to hear that for a long time." Hope clapped again in her mother's arms, smiling up at them. But Lena cried, not out of fear, not out of shame, out of release. For all the months she had carried the weight of motherhood alone, for all the nights she feared her child would grow up never saying dad, for all the evenings she'd lain beside Hope, wondering if love could ever fill that space. Now it spilled over. Alex didn't loosen his hold. He barely breathed, afraid this moment might dissolve if he moved too quickly. And in that moment, he understood something. Sometimes the words we need most don't come from the people we love, but from the smallest voices, the ones too young to lie, too pure to hesitate. No one spoke of it again. They didn't have to. That night, Hope slept in her room, peaceful as always. Lena passed through the living room and saw Alex sitting quietly, eyes fixed on the dark sky outside, where a few stars shimmered faintly against the glass. She didn't ask what he was thinking. She simply sat down beside him. He didn't look at her, but after a while he said, "Do you think someone can become a father, even if he didn't make the child?" Lena was quiet. Then she nodded, her gaze steady. "I think someone becomes a father when they're the first name a child wants to call." November came, and with it the color of the sky began to change. The wind from the Hudson swept into the city like a quiet warning. Winter was near. But the true chill didn't come from the air. It came from the whispers beginning to spread through the financial world. It started with a single comment under a news post about Alex's latest education initiative. Funny how King Systems invests in ethical futures while its CEO shares a home with a woman once accused of corporate theft. Next came a grainy video clip from an old press conference showing Lena's name flashing across a list titled, "Terminated Internal Trust Violations." Then the blogs followed. Cheap, loud, and ruthless. Lena Grace, girlfriend of billionaire Alex King, once accused of embezzling $200,000 from her former company before vanishing from the financial scene. She now lives in the luxury penthouse of New York's most powerful CEO. Is it love or the most strategic move yet? On Monday morning, Emily, Alex's executive assistant, entered the boardroom with a stare like ice. The folder in her hands was heavy, not with paper, but with restrained impatience. "Alex," she said flatly, "I know you don't like being told how to live your life, but right now you're gambling with everything." "The article's nothing new," Alex said coolly. "True, but this time, it's not just gossip. Shareholders are talking. Last time they ignored it, assumed it was tabloid nonsense. But not now. This time the company's name landed in a petition calling for an independent audit due to ethical concerns surrounding the CEO's conduct." Alex didn't respond. His fingers tapped softly on the glass table, but his eyes had shifted calm, yet dangerous. That afternoon, during a closed-door meeting, one of the original seed investors spoke carefully. Alex, we believe in your vision, but a CEO can't be his own liability. If personal decisions start affecting stock value, no one can protect you from what comes next. Lena didn't know what was happening, not until she saw it in people's eyes. The once welcoming glances from staff became tighter, quieter, measured. And one day, while walking Hope near the park, a well-dressed woman approached her, smiling with venom tucked behind lipstick. You're clever. A child and a scandal, that's all it took to enter the big game. Congratulations. Lena didn't respond, but that night she didn't sleep. She lay beside Hope, listening to her daughter's soft breathing, and thought of everything on the verge of collapse. Part of her knew Alex had never stopped choosing her, but another part knew he'd never abandoned the empire he built with nothing but code and hunger. That company was his child. Thousands of lives depended on his choices. And if her past became the reason someone lost their job, if her presence destroyed the reputation Alex built since the days he had no food, no shelter, could she live with that? The next morning, Lena watched Alex through the glass. He was buttoning his shirt with one hand, phone pressed to his ear with the other, sliding reports into his bag. But then, his hand paused. He looked tired, his eyes hollow, and quieter than usual. Lena knew. He had never feared market crashes, but he feared hurting the woman who had entered his life with nothing but a baby and a worn-out name. And because of that, she knew it had to be her who left. Not out of fear, but out of love. That night, she packed after Hope had fallen asleep. No suitcase, just a canvas tote and a folded letter. Alex, you owe us nothing. You've given me more than anyone ever has, not in money, but in a home, in silent belief, and in the way you look at Hope like she's the most beautiful thing to ever exist. I'm not leaving because I'm afraid. I just don't want to be what people use to destroy you. I used to run from my past. This time, I'm not running. I'm choosing to walk away so I can hold my head up again. I owe you a future you can protect. Lena. The next morning, Alex came home to a spotless kitchen. Hope's high chair had been folded away. No toys on the floor, no baby babble, no scent of toast, only a beautiful, empty apartment and a letter on the table. Alex sank into a chair, gripping the note until it wrinkled in his hand. He wasn't angry. He was terrified. Because of all the things he had learned on his way to the top. How to negotiate, how to lead, how to win. No one had ever taught him how to make someone stay. For the next 3 days, he canceled everything. Emily didn't dare enter his office. His secretary received only one instruction. Cancel it all. I have something more important to do. Alex retraced her life. The bus stop she once described. Churches that offered help to single mothers. Non-profits where she once filled out forms for shelter. No one had seen her. No one knew. She disappeared as softly as she came and left behind a silence he couldn't name. In a tiny bookstore in Brooklyn. No neon signs, no ambient music. Just the smell of old pages and warm yellow light. Lena found work. It was the only place that hadn't asked for her history. The owner had asked just one thing. Do you love books? She'd nodded. Good. We only need someone who can be quiet and put the world back in order, one shelf at a time. She worked every day, Hope always by her side, nestled in a stroller by the register, in the warm sunlight that streamed in like a silent greeting. In the mornings, she organized titles, dusted covers, relabeled old volumes. At lunch, she fed Hope while reading aloud from Langston Hughes or beginner's picture books. At night, they returned to a small room on the 3rd floor of an aging apartment block. The walls were thin. The floor creaked. No central heating, but there was a night lamp Alex had once bought for Hope. She brought it with her, not for its price, but because its light had once helped her daughter sleep through a fever. Some nights, Lena woke at Hope's soft cough. She would sit up, rub her daughter's back, and out of instinct reach across the bed to her left, where warmth used to be. Now, only empty space. She pulled her hand back, sat in silence, then stood to boil water, like a soldier refusing to rest. She didn't cry anymore. She'd passed the crying phase. Now came the quiet days, the long pauses while reshelving books, her hand brushing over the little prints. Alex once read that book to Hope, his voice deep, calm. What is essential is invisible to the eye. Lena remembered, and it made her chest ache. She hadn't left because she stopped loving him. She had left because she loved too much. And she couldn't let that love become the reason he lost everything he'd built. But some nights when Hope slept soundly and rain tapped gently at the third-floor window, she wished just once she could go back. Not to explain, not to beg, just to touch his hand. One more time. The late afternoon rain fell on Brooklyn like a quiet reckoning. No thunder, no roaring wind. Just cold, patient drops as if trying to wash away every trace of what had once happened on this old street. Lena held Hope close, one arm wrapped around her daughter, the other struggling with a cheap umbrella from the bookstore. It kept flipping backward in the gusts, soaking her hair, rain slipping down her neck. Hope buried her face into her mother's shoulder, drifting to sleep, pacifier still in her mouth like a small child, clinging to the last familiar thread of safety. Lena walked fast, eyes fixed on the train tracks in the distance, hoping to make the early train home. But as she turned the corner, she stopped. Through the silver curtain of rain, across the wet sidewalk, he stood. No umbrella, no coat. His dark shirt clung to his chest, soaked through, hair dripping into his eyes. But those eyes, still the same, the ones she saw on the night they met, the night she no longer felt like a person, but someone he called by name. Alex. Lena froze like she'd been struck by wind. Her heart slammed against her ribs, sudden and sharp, like waking from a dream that felt too real. Alex, she whispered. So softly she wasn't sure if she'd said it aloud or only in her head. Hope stirred, opened her eyes and giggled. A small, bright sound like a silver bell ringing in the cold rain. Alex walked toward them, slowly, deliberately, as if each step was carrying him through months of absence, loss, and everything left unsaid. Lena didn't move. She wanted to run, wanted to wrap her arms around him, but her legs wouldn't listen. Her heart was a knot, hopeful, hurting, terrified, longing. He stopped just an arm's length away. His eyes met hers, wet, raw, unafraid. And then he dropped to one knee, on the empty street, in the rain, in the middle of everything unpredictable. From his pocket, he pulled a small velvet box, soaked, weathered, but inside, a simple gold ring, no diamond, no flourish, just a quiet circle. Like them, imperfect, but enduring. Etched inside were two words, still here, despite the rain, despite the past, despite a world that once turned its back. Alex's voice was low, hoarse not from cold, but from something deeper. Not because I pity you, not because I think you need saving. He looked up at her, red-eyed but unflinching. But because I've lived long enough to know the world can take your name, your title, even your freedom, but no one can take the person who gives your heart a reason to stay. I'm not asking you to stay for Hope. I'm asking you to stay for me. Because for the first time in my life, I don't want to be strong by myself anymore. He paused, swallowed, then steady as ever. Lena Grace, will you marry me? Lena stood in silence. Her hands shook. She looked down at him, this man who had once helped her believe she was more than what the world left behind, now kneeling before her. Not to redeem, not to apologize, but to simply say, I choose you. Hope giggled again, then clapped. Once, twice, tiny palms slapping the air like she could feel something wonderful blooming around them. Lena covered her mouth. Her tears didn't fall like a flood. They broke quietly from deep within, like something long held finally exhaled. She knelt beside him, still holding Hope, but now with eyes that no longer looked afraid, only grateful. I say yes, she whispered, but only if you know, I'm not perfect. Alex laughed, a rare, unguarded sound. Not because he needed to be strong, but because finally he didn't have to be. I don't want perfect, he said softly. I just want real. They embraced, all three of them, on that rain-drenched street, in the middle of a world that once felt too cruel, but now softened, just for a moment, into something that felt like grace. No fireworks, no music, just each other, and a ring that said only, "Still here," 1 year later. The little house sat quietly in a leafy neighborhood on the northern edge of New York. No iron gates, no smart security system, just a white-painted porch, a line of trees that turned crimson each autumn, and a wooden swing where Hope liked to sit every afternoon. Inside, laughter filled the kitchen, bathed in soft morning sunlight. Lena sat cross-legged on the floor, gently helping Hope arrange colored blocks. "This one's a square. This is a circle. Can you remember?" Hope didn't answer, but her eyes lit up like something had just clicked. She suddenly grabbed a triangle block, held it high, and declared, "Bah!" Lena looked up. At the door, Alex had just walked in suit, still on, tie slightly loosened, holding a bright blue rubber duck. "Special delivery for my little princess," he said, bending to kiss Hope's forehead. She squealed with laughter and held out her arms. Alex lifted her with ease, spinning her once in a wide circle, just enough for her soft hair to fan out like a little cloud. Lena watched, smiling. Not a beaming smile, not loud. Just that kind of quiet joy that settles deep into the soul, the kind that tells you you're finally exactly where you're meant to be. Lena today. She no longer feared the sound of mail hitting the floor, no longer held her breath when the phone rang, no longer looked over her shoulder on the street. Each morning, she tied her hair back, slipped on a plain button-down shirt, walked Hope to the half-day preschool nearby, then went to work at a nonprofit supporting homeless women. She never shared her story. She just listened. But sometimes when a young woman sat across from her and whispered, "I don't think I deserve to be loved anymore," Lena would place a hand gently on her shoulder and say, "I used to think that too, but sometimes all we need is for someone to really see us." Alex today, still a CEO, still had back-to-back meetings, but his calendar always had a block at 6 p.m., marked off every day for home. He always came back with something, tiny shoes, a yellow rose, or just a piece of paper with Hope's scribbles taped onto his laptop screen. Sometimes Lena asked, "Do the shareholders still question you?" Alex would shake his head. "They only need to know I'm keeping the company on course. And me? I just need to know you and Hope are here when I come home." Then came March. The phone call arrived from the court clerk. The man who had once destroyed Lena, the one who'd pinned embezzlement charges on her and disappeared while she was pregnant, had finally been caught. He'd been found running a fraudulent finance firm in another state under a fake name. The prosecutor requested Lena testify. She was a key part of the case, the missing link to expose the full scale of his fraud. When Lena got the call, she didn't feel fear. She felt pause, a moment of stillness. She thought that chapter of her life had ended long ago. That night, she told Alex everything. He didn't rush in with opinions. He just listened, then gently took her hand. "Do you think I should testify?" she asked. He looked at her for a long time. "I think if you want that wound to finally close, truly close, then yes, you should. But I'll stand behind you, no matter what you choose." The day of the trial, Lena sat quietly in the witness room. Her hands were clasped tight. She wore a soft gray blouse, no jewelry, no heavy makeup. She wasn't there for revenge. She was there to tell the truth because one day she would want to teach her daughter that silence isn't always noble. When they called her in, she walked with quiet resolve, eyes forward, back straight. Not with pride, but with dignity rebuilt piece by piece from every broken year. She told her story, how she was pressured to sign off on suspicious funds, how she was blamed, how she lost her job, her apartment, how she wandered the streets that first rainy night with nothing but fear and a child in her belly. No tears, no shaking voice. But in the courtroom, people looked down. After the session, the defense lawyer approached. "He's asked to see you privately. No media, no recordings." Lena looked through the small window of the adjacent room. He was older, hair thinner, hands trembling. His eyes looked more afraid than guilty, but it was still the same face, the one she once believed would be her daughter's father. She stepped inside. He didn't look up at first, then his voice cracked. I'm not here to ask forgiveness. I wanted to say I was wrong about everything. I thought you were weak, but you're stronger than I ever imagined. Lena nodded. Thank you for saying that. He hesitated. The little girl, does she know who I am? Lena's voice was clear, not bitter, not soft, just true. My daughter knows who held her when she had a fever, who taught her to tie her shoes, who holds her hand when she crosses the street. That's enough. That evening, Lena returned home. Hope was scribbling across the floor with crayons. Next to her, Alex sat cross-legged, fingers smeared with paint, trying to fold a butterfly from paper. It looked more like a bat. Looks like a bat with identity issues, he laughed. Hope looked up, eyes wide. Bat daddy pretty? Lena burst out laughing for the first time in weeks. Alex looked at her. You okay? She nodded. I'm okay, because we're still here. That night, Lena sat alone on the porch. The sky was clear. She held a notebook, the one she used to write in when she was still learning how to survive. On one of the pages she had once scribbled, being a single mother is learning how to walk while shaking. Tonight she added a new line. Being a mother in a real home is learning how to stop and realize you don't have to shake anymore. Inside, Hope was fast asleep. Alex tiptoed across the kitchen, setting a single yellow rose in a glass by the sink. Just like he always did. A man who didn't say I love you with grand speeches, but with the tiny things done quietly, consistently, beautifully. Family isn't defined by blood. It's the place where someone calls your name right even when the world once forgot who you were. You're watching Soul Stories exclusive to our channel. If you're still with us, drop a comment. We read and cherish them all. Subscribe to support more heartfelt, original stories. Thanks for being part of the Soul Stories family. A morning like any other. No alarm blaring, no urgent meetings, no subject lines filled with exclamation marks. Only the soft clinking of a spoon against glass, the gentle rustle of a page being turned, and Hope's giggles as she dropped her stuffed bear off the tiny chair by the window. Sunlight filtered through the sheer curtains, touching every quiet detail of the house. A single-colored vase, a coat draped lazily over a chair, scribbled drawings taped all over the fridge like a miniature museum of unnamed dreams. Lena sat beside her daughter, a book resting open in her lap. Her hair fell gently around her shoulders. From time to time, she'd tuck a strand behind her ear, but her eyes weren't really on the page. She was listening, not to the words in the book, but to the sound of a life no longer haunted by fear. Alex emerged from the kitchen holding 2 steaming cups of coffee. He set one in front of Lena, then sat across from her, resting his elbows on the table, eyes following Hope as she built a tower from colored blocks. Our kid just built a house and immediately tore it down, he grinned, like a CEO pivoting mid-strategy. Lena laughed, saying nothing. She just picked up her coffee and gently clinked it against his. A little morning ritual they kept. No big declarations, just a quiet reminder. We survived, and now we are truly living. They didn't speak much. They didn't need to. In the silence was everything. That years of loneliness had never been able to offer peace without reason, comfort without compromise. Hope crawled over and handed Alex a piece of paper colored in green crayon. Daddy here, she declared proudly. The drawing was a large circle with 3 strands of hair and 2 oversized ears. Alex chuckled and scooped her into his lap, rubbing his forehead against her cheek like a big, clumsy bear. Lena watched them, eyes soft. She set her book aside and spoke. So softly it was almost a breath. I never imagined I could be this happy. Alex looked up, and for a moment his gaze drifted away from the present, back to a boy who once sat alone at an old train station, clutching the only shirt his mother left behind. Back to nights sleeping on wooden benches where no one waited and no one called his name. Then he looked back at Lena, at Hope, and nodded quietly. I imagined it from the very beginning. I remember my mother, she had nothing but always said, home is where someone's waiting for you. When she died, I thought home was just a beautiful lie people tell to feel less alone. Until I saw you and our daughter standing in the rain that first night. That's when I knew I had found the real thing. Hope yawned and climbed into Lena's lap. She reached toward Alex and murmured, Daddy hug. And so the three of them, on an old fabric armchair, in a not-so-fancy room filled with light, wrapped their arms around one another. No music played. No one was watching. No camera captured the moment. But if anyone had seen it, they would have known. That was happiness. No definitions needed. No perfection required. Just presence. Moments later, Hope fell asleep in Lena's lap, her tiny hand still gripping the hem of Alex's shirt. Alex rose quietly, tiptoed to the hallway, grabbed a thin blanket, and gently draped it over both of them. He didn't say anything, just stood there, as if trying to memorize every detail. The way sunlight landed on Lena's hair, the way Hope's breath rose and fell, the curve of a smile that had taken a lifetime to earn. Nothing grand happened, no climax, no drama. And yet, in that stillness, a new life had quietly begun.